This week, we are turning to the perennial subject in paranormal world, haunted homes. This is the 5th episode already about haunted homes. If you missed the previous episodes, I'll leave the playlist in the description and at the corner of the screen. As you'd find in the previous episodes, haunted home stories often evolve around one particular ghost or a resentful soul that had a history in that place. But not all haunted home stories seem to have such a clear definition. Some house, or even an entire neighborhood, seem to be just plagued by endless misfortunes and bad lucks. The word cursed comes to my mind, for lack of better expression. Today, I collected stories about such cursed homes. A student flat that is plagued with various deaths in mysterious circumstances. An entire neighborhood full of unfortunate events. A house full of various ghosts, and a flat that drove a family away with a series of scary incidents. Here are 4 allegedly true stories about cursed homes. As always, handpicked, translated, and narrated by host Anthony. I went to university in Gyeongsang-Bukdo. It moved to the current location in the 80s, and I hear the whole plot was created by flattening a small mountain. Indeed, across the library building are still a low slope with quite a few tombs. Around the university are naturally various lodgings catering its students, usually in the form of studio flats. The oldest block is by now 20-30 years. Among them is, let me call it the studio flat. It was built in 1995, and as far as I know, at least 5 people died in it. From the outside, it looks perfectly normal, still clean for its age, bright inside, and the rent is reasonable. From what I gathered from a local real estate dealer, the building was owned by a retired professor. It was an investment for his pension years. Problem was, the plot for the building was where an irrigation channel passed through. There were lots of protest from the locals, but the old professor ignored them and built the flat anyway. It was one of the new studio flats in the area, and initially very popular. But for some reason, hardly any lodger stayed longer than 3 months. Some commented they felt like being watched when they went to bed at night. And then, one lodger failed to pay for rent and utility bills for months. In the end, the manager knocked on his door and found the lodger hung. Simple suicide case it might have been, except on the wall were numerous scratch marks, as if somebody went at it with sharp nails. Nevertheless, it was a time before the internet, and the flat operated as usual. Second incident happened in 1998. They were a student couple, both attending the civil engineering department. And the female student slashed her boyfriend's throat with a machete while he was asleep. She later claimed a woman's voice kept telling her to kill her boyfriend. The third incident took place in 2003. A female student was found dead in her flat with both her eyes and mouth wide opened. When she was alive, she often mentioned she didn't feel alone when she was in the flat. The next incident was in 2010, while I attended the university myself. It was a male student. He was bright and friendly, and I saw him too at the restaurant where he worked part-time. Then in June that year, I was on my way to my room when I heard a loud thud from nearby. followed by screams of people. I knew something terrible took place and chose another longer route back home. Apparently, the male student threw himself off from the rooftop of the D Studio flat building. The flat is still opened, usually catering foreign exchange students who do not know by now the notorious reputation of the building. And yet, still many of them would not stay longer than several months. I'm just an ordinary 20-something working a full-time office job. My parents divorced when I was 16, and since then I and my two younger sisters lived with Mom. Only recently, Mom moved out to a countryside with the youngest sister. Needed some peace and quiet, she said, and the other sister went to live with Dad, leaving me alone in our old family home. And something weird started happening since I was left alone. I feel presence, multiple presences, at home. The first time I sensed it was when I had a friend over to drink at my place. We both got pissed and dozed off, but something, indescribably unpleasant sensation woke me up in the middle of the night. I was confused to find a man, a 40-something, looking very much like chewed up by life, walked across my room, stepping on my right arm on the way too, and disappeared through the window and wall. It didn't hurt me, but I still vividly felt something stepping on my arm. I don't get usually scared. Guess my sense of fear is particularly dull. So I didn't panic despite the apparition, and slept on. Nevertheless, when I woke up in the morning, I had to wonder, what was that I saw? A ghost? I asked my friend if he sensed something weird. Indeed he did, but it was not what I expected. He woke up during the night too, and saw me talking to somebody in my sleep. And it was just the beginning. Now, I often sleep with a duvet over my face, just a quirky habit from my childhood. And that night I was sleeping completely covered under the duvet. And yet, I woke up in the middle of the night because of the strong sense of presence looking down on me. I didn't see it because my face was under the duvet. Instead, I lifted my foot and stepped on the presence's foot. The unknown presence moved its foot away and disappeared. Once again, I didn't panic or anything, and just slept on. The reason I didn't think too much of it was, of course, partially because my naturally dull sense of fear got even duller in the half-asleep state, but also because I didn't feel any malicious vibe from the presence. The presence didn't feel like having any intention other than just happen to observe me. A few weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night and turned around, trying to sleep more, when I heard somebody saying, "I can't stop myself." And that thing jumped on me from the behind, and though it was just a couple of seconds, I clearly sensed it violating me before it disappeared again. It left me stunned, if anything else. I could fall back to sleep only after I turned on the light and left it on. I thought about moving out too, but I just started working and I had no means to afford another place. Well, at least these, whatever presences, still didn't feel so evil towards me, so I stayed on. Various apparitions continued. One time I woke up and saw a guy about my age, all dressed up down to his carefully coiffed hair, staring at me, and then disappear when I blinked next. Or in front of my mirror in the bathroom, I looked back, sensing a presence behind me, and saw a bare-faced, cute young woman smiling at me. Or opened my eyes in the middle of the night and found an old man in traditional dress sitting cross-legged by my feet, his face obscured by the halo behind his head. I was getting almost used to these constant and spontaneous encounters, but there came an instant that finally triggered my fear. I was sleeping with my face under the duvet at night, and woke up from the sense of a presence. I didn't see it, but it felt like the same presence whose foot I touched with my foot. This time, it made a first move by lightly kicking my foot. I was annoyed and responded by stepping on its foot as before. And right that moment, a strong force tied me down. Even though I was covered under the duvet, I felt it. The terrifying fury and murderous energy it emanated. I could sense right behind the thin layer of duvet the presence glaring at me face to face. I felt so threatened that I spontaneously chanted a line from Buddhist scripture. I'm not a Buddhist, and that's the only chant I know. 나미아미타불 관세음보살, 나미아미타불 관세음보살, 나미아미타불 관세음보살. And thank God, it worked. The force pinning me down disappeared, together with the presence itself. I hurriedly turned on the light in the room. That's already 7 months ago. Now I keep the light on all night long when I go to bed. It seems to work, and my nights haven't been disturbed by another apparition meantime. But I'm not sure if it's going to last that way or not. When I was 11 or so, my family moved to a little flat at the edge of the town, practically out in nowhere among rice field and mountains. I guess that was the best option for my indebted parents. Despite the situation, the first impression of the new place was a positive one. It came with a sizable garden full of various trees, and the landlord seemed also friendly. But inside the flat on the semi-basement level, it was quite dark. Because my both parents worked, Mom ran a small shop in town, I had to be home alone quite often, and I spent most time outside to get away from the lingering darkness inside. The first instant was after 2-3 months in the new place. I still remember how I was struck by the pressing sense of grief for no reason and started crying. Mom couldn't understand what was up with me, neither could I, to be honest, and scolded me that it brought a bad luck crying at the dinner table. I tried to swallow the tears, but I couldn't help it. Following morning I woke up and found both Mom and Dad were not home. My older sister told me I didn't need to go to school that day and took me to somewhere by taxi. It was my dad, on a hospital bed. Early in the morning, a drunken driver crashed into Dad's car. Fortunately, it wasn't fatal, but he had to stay in hospital for 3 months. And during those 3 months, I started to notice something weird when I went to bed. It was summer season, a kind of weather that one got sweaty while just sitting down. And yet, I felt weird chills, almost stinging sensation on the skin, like when you dip your hand in icy water. I pulled a blanket over my head, made a little peephole to observe what was going on in the dark. Nothing much happened for a long time, and I was just about to doze away when I noticed something moving about the door. I was a bit scared but also curious, and lifted the blanket to see what it was. And it was just then that I got paralyzed. A big beast. To my kid's mind, a tiger-like beast would be the best description, was prowling past my parents' room and towards mine. I panicked, but could not move or scream or even just close my eyes. When I got around, my sister was shaking me up to wake up, asking why the heck I was covering the blanket over my head in summer, only to gasp for air. Such a night terror continued in a similar context the whole time while my dad was hospitalized. A few months after Dad was discharged, it was now my turn. My grandpa, Mom's father, was a pastor, and his countryside home he kept a dozen dogs, from a retriever to Pomeranian. When he first came to visit us after we moved in, he looked around the flat and said, "Well, it is indeed spacious, but..." with a dark face. And next time we visited him, he gave us a puppy, that the flat had a large garden to it and would make a good environment for the puppy. The puppy was very energetic, and I loved to play with it, as happened on that day too. The puppy ran over a shady corner in the garden, and I was just carefreely chasing after it. And the next thing I knew was, with the sound of some wooden branch snapping, I was fallen into a hole on the ground, apparently into a septic tank. Fortunately, I didn't fall completely and could barely manage to grab onto the edge of the opening. I cried out for Mom, but Mom was of course at her shop. It was a pure luck that the landlord was just stepping out to go out and heard my cry. He pulled me out and washed off the disgusting goo off my legs, and it still left my feet blue and swollen for 3 days. Had the landlord gone out just a few minutes earlier than he did, I might have died the most disgusting death. But my bad luck continued. That day, I was home alone as usual. I got hungry, so fished out some pieces of meat from the pot-up kimchi stew and was just watching TV when Mom called that she got a lot to carry and if I would come to her shop to help her. "But don't ride a bike over," said Mom. I said, "Okay," and took my bike out. I just didn't want to walk all the way. There was a crossway on the way. It was on the road with low traffic, so the crossway was the kind without a traffic light. I did check on both directions and started across the road on my bike, and the speeding lorry ran down the slope and hit me. Later I was told that I was thrown good 5-6 meters to the bush on the roadside. When I woke up, I was in a taxi. I thought I just had a bad dream, and with a sense of relief tried to get up, only to find my both arms broken. "Mom, Dad, what happened to me?" I cried, but who answered was a strange woman in the car. Hey, sweetie, it's okay. You were hit by a car. We're on the way to hospital. Now, tell me your mom's phone number, or your dad's. In the emergency, I was left all alone and just cried and shivered. There were so many other more serious emergencies going on all around me that nobody could pay attention to me. Right next to my bed was another kid and another victim of a car accident. Each situation was much more dire, that they had to amputate his toes there and then, blood and flesh spluttering everywhere. And in that pandemonium, I heard somebody saying,
"Why, she's still alive. He should have finished her, not just broken limbs."
At the time, I just assumed it should be a doctor saying, and just swallowed the inappropriate comment with the tears. But looking back, it rang strangely clear in my ears, despite all the noises and screams around me. And by the way, what kind of psychopathic doctor would say such a thing? Anyway, I was kept waiting for 7 hours more before my operation because of a few pieces of meat I nibbled earlier in the day, and had to stay in hospital for 8 months more afterwards. In those months, I had witnessed so many deaths, from a kid died of car accident to an old patient who slipped and fell to his death in the toilet. It was the worst time in my life. And as soon as I came back home, it was now my mom's turn. She collapsed one morning and had to take an emergency operation. She'd been suffering stinging pain at the abdomen from about the time of my accident, but ignored it for all the things going on at home. Turned out, she had typhlitis. And during those months she ignored it, the inflammation spread it to other organs too. Had she waited just a few days more, it could have been fatal. And it all happened in the span of 2 years we lived in that flat, and plenty more. My grandpa Dad's father, who lived by himself, died a horrible death because he mistook a herbicide for a drink. Kids next door played with fire, which went out of control and almost burnt down our building too. In those 2 years, I had 3 pet dogs, and all of them either died or had an accident. The first dog, a Pomeranian, was suffocated to death while a bigger dog from a neighborhood trying to mate with her. Next 2 dogs both broke their legs. In the end, Mom sent them back to Grandpa. Mom got me a couple of bunnies instead, and within a week they were found dead, clearly attacked and killed by some beast. Next was a chicken, and again was found dead, missing 1 leg. The landlord of my mom's shop went bankrupt, and Mom was kicked out of the building. She chased after the landlord to at least get her deposit back, but he died suddenly in his sleep, and Mom had to lose her business entirely. Our next-door neighbor changed 5 times, and they all left the place for a misfortune. An old single guy left after a month for failing health. A young couple left because the pregnant wife almost died of preeclampsia. The next family was Dad's friend's family. He borrowed a sum of money from Dad and ran away one day, only to be caught later for another offense. Then the family of the kids that almost burnt down the building. They moved out because their kids kept making troubles to neighborhoods. I hear the kids miraculously stopped being such a nuisance after they moved. The last family I saw was a young couple with a baby. The wife went away after a fight for her husband's infidelity. When she came back after a few days, She found her baby gone funny. Apparently the husband just abandoned the poor baby alone while his wife was away. I hear they eventually divorced. I've never seen my parents fighting with each other more than this period. They were constantly arguing for nothing. Once Dad even left home after a particularly big fight and disappeared for a month. On top of it all, I saw a ghost too. Our neighbor upstairs often had memorial rituals. One day they shared food offering used for the ritual with us. My mom, coming from a very strong Protestant background that regards the traditional memorial ritual as a form of idolatry, threw the food away. And then I saw something looking like a white smoke or cloud appear from the ceiling, flew here and there, disappear through the ceiling again only to reappear, and hover above the food bin where Mom threw the ritual food away. Now, I didn't remember all these events and those years for a long time. Everything got better once we moved out of the flat, and I think I subconsciously blocked them. It all came back only because my older sister talked about the incident to her husband at a family gathering, that had the family stayed longer, it might have been her turn to have a serious incident, and that her brother, me, often saw weird things and mumbled about it in a monotonous voice, which scared her a lot. It triggered back all the memories that were thus far sealed. And I just thought to share it with you. My family used to be pretty well off when I was little, and my dad was once a successful painter turned into equally successful businessman. But in the year I entered primary school, Dad's business quickly collapsed. My parents divorced, and we had to move out from the nice house in Seoul to a small flat in Incheon, and then further shrunk down to a 2-room flat on the first floor of a shabby commercial building. In the basement was an old-fashioned tea room, as I remember. It was already pretty miserable, but it got quickly even worse when strange things continued in the second room of the flat. On the first weekend in that place, a few relatives from Mom's side were to visit for a housewarming gathering. And that morning, the next-door neighbor told a weird story to Mom. "You see, I had a dream last night. A strange woman came and asked me to hand over a baby swaddle, so I was about to give it to her when you came to stop me, that I shouldn't. You and the strange woman tussled over the swaddle till it ripped apart, and the strange woman and you each took the halved swaddle away. You may think it's funny, but dream left me feeling uneasy, so I'm telling you." Indeed, my mom just thought it funny and busied herself to prepare for relatives' visit. And that afternoon, my baby sister fell from the window of the second room and broke her skull. The little flat was full of people for the housewarming party, and nobody saw the baby crawling up to the window. But who could have imagined it? The window was good 1.2 meters high from the floor, and there was no piece of furniture for my sister to have helped herself to get there. The second incident was not quite 2 months later. The second room was our bedroom. The big bed that used to belong to my parents was given to us 3, me, my little brother, and baby sister, and Mom slept alone on the small bed that used to belong to me. That night too, I and my siblings fell asleep early, and Mom watched TV lying on her bed. When she was ready to sleep herself, she turned off the TV, but she smelled something weird when she looked around where it was from. She saw me in the family portrait hanging on the wall, growing a long, dangling hair and glaring down at Mom. Mom passed out. Following morning she recounted what happened and told me especially to stay alerted for the day. But it wasn't me who got hurt at the end of the day. It was my little brother. He fell from the bed and broke his arm. Not just a crack, but the bone crushed into bits, like he had a car accident, even though the bed was not even 30 centimeters high from the floor. He had to be hospitalized for a month. Nobody said it straight, but we all started avoiding the second room. While Mom was busy caring for my brother in the hospital, an older cousin came to stay and take care of me for a few days. One morning we woke up and found the flat freezing cold. The cousin asked me to check on the boiler, and on the way to the boiler cabinet, I heard noise from the second room. I checked in, and the TV was on, blaring the static noise and static screen. I walked in and turned it off and went to the cousin and told that the TV was funny. But when she came to the room with me and turned the TV on again, it just showed the morning news. The cousin simply told me not to make up such a story. That afternoon, the cousin left, and my uncle was to be my babysitter from the evening on. But he didn't come past 9, and then 10 at night. I was a bit scared to be alone home, so turned on the TV, wrapped myself with a blanket, and dozed away. I woke up with a weird noise. I opened my eyes and saw it. In horror films, people scream when they encounter a ghost. In reality, I tell you, you can't even utter a sound. When I saw the woman crouched down with her back to me, with her long hair scattered over the floor, I didn't dare to make any sound or move. I wasn't paralyzed. I wasn't dreaming. I was wide awake, but I couldn't do anything because I deathly feared she might turn to look at me if I did. In the end, we moved out of that place just 4 months later. I hear weird things kept happening even afterwards. There was a fire with a fatality, or another tenant kept seeing weird things there and moved out. That's already 9 years ago, but I remember everything clearly. After the first post, the original poster wrote this follow-up. After I posted about the haunted flat, people have kept asking me if the building is still standing and where that is, that they want to visit there themselves. Some even figured out which building it is from the few descriptions I gave. But I strongly advise you not to visit, because she's still there. Writing the first post brought me back the memory. Not entirely pleasant, but with a 9-year distance, it was also somewhat nostalgic. I still live in the same area, so 10 days after posting the story, I visited the old flat again for the first time in 9 years. I must say, I felt chills when I stood in front of the building again. I didn't feel like going in. But I was there already. Now the tea room was gone, and the shop space was occupied by some other businesses. But the dingy hallway and the wall where years of paint and repaint were peeling off were the same as I remembered. I walked up to the first floor and tried the door to my old flat. It was locked, of course. The little window on the door was neatly covered with a curtain. I took it as the flat being occupied and somewhat felt relieved. When I came out onto the street, the same old corner shop sign caught my eyes. I went there and found the same lady keeping the shop too. I greeted to her, and she welcomed me, offering a can of coffee, briefly chattering about how life has been. I couldn't resist asking her about the old flat. "Well, nobody seems to be able to live there for a long time," she said. The current occupants, too, was to move out soon because their young son saw something weird there. Apparently, it left him so traumatized that he couldn't even go to school. It piqued my curiosity again. I knew from the church next to the flat building I could look into the old flat window. It was so close as to be able to touch it. I walked up to the church and looked over to the old flat. I don't know what I was expecting, but I didn't quite expect that. Through the frosted window glass, she was looking back at me with her face practically stuck on the glass. It might have been a current occupant of the flat, you may say, but that face didn't belong to a living human. I froze with fear. My eyes welled up despite of myself, while the face wiggled on the frosted glass as if trying to get closer to me, before it disappeared again a minute later. Only then I could move away too, run away, with the tears running down my face. That night I had a sleep paralysis, and saw the face again shown on the ceiling. 3 days from the day, now I feel calmer now, but I'm telling you again, don't visit that building. She's still there. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. They were rather long and full of various anecdotes, so I hope it wasn't too difficult for you to follow. What did you think? Could there really be such a place as cursed beyond just haunted? It is indeed a terrifying prospect if that should be possible. If you enjoyed my work, please give it a thumbs up and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. My channel brings you various weird and scary tales straight from Korean web communities, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that bring them outside Korea. If you'd support me more directly, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. Buy Me a Coffee supporters enjoy an early access to my new content. Or if you prefer, there's also a super thanks option on YouTube to make a small donation too. Thank you. Until next Sunday, stay safe and take care.